Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Calvin Lee, Executive Director of IMAA, Indiana Mineral Aggregates Association, and just wanted to pop on for a minute before the um, meat and potatoes part of the webinar begins. Um, just wanted to say that I appreciate the opportunity on behalf of our members to work directly with INDOT on the changes relative to the ITM 211. Um, there were several drafts that we had the opportunity to influence based upon our members' needs and desires. And as a result, it is what it is today. So thank you to NDOT for that. Also, thank you to our IMAA technical committee under the leadership of Trent Sanders from IMI for your efforts to work directly with NDOT on this and get us to where we are today. So hopefully at the end of this webinar, you'll have all the information that you need to make you successful going forward. I understand there's going to be an opportunity to ask questions and get answers, and I'll get out of the way and let that happen. So again, thank you so much, and we look forward to working further with NDOT on other opportunities. So now I'm going to kick it over to Katie Allison, Office Manager for IMAA, and she'll take it from here. Katie?
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Katie Allison with the Indiana Mineral Aggregates Association, and I want to thank you all for joining us today for the Preparing for ITM 211 Changes in 2026 webinar. Before we get started, I want to go over some housekeeping items real quick. So first of all attendees are muted during this webinar. If you have a question, please use the Q&A feature, which should be down somewhere on the bottom of your screen, and we will address questions at the designated times throughout the presentation, as well as at the end of the presentation. There are several moderators as panelists going on in the background that will be answering those questions as you submit them. You will also have the opportunity to upvote questions that you think are the most important for our presenter and moderators to answer using that Q&A function that should be down at the bottom of your screen. You may also see a raise your hand function that's down there. We are not using that today. So please don't raise your hand during the presentation. Use that Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We are also recording today's session, and the recording will be shared with all attendees when it's ready. You will receive an email with the recording information as well as the links to download any of the additional webinar materials that are available, including the study guide and the slides and the updated Q&A with answers on there. And then finally, we have to mention that this webinar is conducted in accordance with the IMAA antitrust policy, and that we ask all participants, from panelists to attendees, to refrain from discussing competitively sensitive information. And you can find that full IMAA antitrust policy on our website at indmaa.org. So to get started now, I'm going to hand it over to Matt Beeson, the Director of the Division of Materials and Tests with INDOT, for today's presentation.
And just give me a second, make sure I share everything correctly here. Thanks everyone for attending. Hopefully today you come away with something and learning about what we've done and what we're doing on this. You see here the journey to the changes to ITM 211 that are effective coming up here at the beginning of next year. So, all right. So I'm just going to go through a slide here of kind of the outline of what we're going to talk about today and how we got started and why we started this journey and the background behind it and some things we learned along the way. And then the changes that we made that are taking effect next year related to loadout and other changes in ITM 211. And we'll go through a detailed review of all of those changes and some discussion on those. Because there are more things than just the related to loadout that we made changes to for next year. So I'll cover a section on how the actual data for the loadout gets entered in SharePoint, some discussion on that, and then some of the training opportunities, including today and upcoming on the changes here to ITM 211. So as I said, we'll start off with a brief review of what we did in beginning in early 2024, which now sounds like 6 months ago, but I guess it's like 18 months ago now or something. So, so we'll review how we got started. And just quickly, for those of you that are new, we say ITM, that's Indiana Test Method, and ITM 211 is the Certified Aggregate Producer Program and a lot of the guidelines and things related to that program. And then we'll start talking about percent within limits, PWL. It is a way to calculate statistics that is similar to what has been done with CAP for a long time. Calculating statistics is just a slightly different method of looking at it. And personally, I think it's a little easier to understand for the non-technical. So we'll get to more of that, what PWL is here in a little bit. So this first slide here, I'm not expecting anyone to be able to read it, but this is how we got started in 2024 so we started off with a pilot study in late 23, actually, with a few volunteers. And then in 24, we started where we were asking all producers to start inputting this data. So I'll skip past this. This is just a full memo that went out from our office to the producers to get this kicked off. So what we started realizing in conjunction, I'll say, thank you, big thanks to IMA and industry for agreeing to sit down and meet with us. And we had we have our larger technical committee meetings that we'll meet with, but we also started these small focus group meetings. And this was one of the things that came out from that very productive series of meeting with a smaller group of industry is us at INDOT and the district geologists started to notice that we were having some frequent failures, depending on the district, maybe upwards of 20 or 30% of gradation failures on loadout samples. We'd go to the essentially stockpile samples at the aggregate source. And so we started talking about, is there any way we could evaluate what we're seeing, figure out maybe what the issues are, and potentially improve the program. So what we decided to do to just really gather how big of an issue or how small of an issue we might have is to just gather all the data from what producers were testing for loadout. So we honed in on sizes 8 and 11 as those being the most critical to the downstream products, asphalt and concrete, namely. Not that the other sizes that you make aren't important, but maybe the gradation for 53s may not be as critical as the gradation for 8s in the grand scheme of things as far as INDOT asset performance. So that's why we picked 8s and 11s to gather the data on, and then we analyzed what we got. So this is what we looked at, and I guess this was the initial round of data of how many products of each kind we had. And actually, the 8s refers to just almost 1,700 loadout tests there on the 98 different products. And out of all of them, 75% had a percent within limits of 95 to 100%, meaning greater than, if you compare it to statistical compliance, so greater than 95%. So that's excellent. We ended up with 12% of those, less than 90, the other remaining percent there in between 90 and 95. And we started focusing on 90 as a flag. I'll probably talk a little bit about that more later, but we're talking about load for production. I'll talk about that in a minute. So Similar results on the 11s. We had 3/4 of them that had a very excellent PWL and only 10% that were less than 90. And so this is just an excerpt from the section 917 of our standard specs that highlights that the CAP program is a 95% compliant program. So on production, and this is what we're always have enforced and will continue to focus on, is 95% compliance for production. But for loadout, we discussed that perhaps 90%, seeing as there's additional things that happen between production and stockpiling, loadout, et cetera, is the right kind of flag a cutoff. So I'll get more to that too here in a little bit. So this is, again, what we did in 25 after gathering all that data, as we discussed with industry. What do we do moving forward? And what you're going to see today is an output of that, what we decided as a group to do, and then continue gathering data. So we did continue gathering data throughout 2025. We do have plans, hopefully, for a longer term IT solution that's not SharePoint, but as any of you know, that developing software at the government takes time. So that's on the list of things to do, and we'll continue using the SharePoint site. And again, most producers have been successful with most products, as over 75% meet the PWL of 95. So again, highlighting what I said earlier, what we're trying to do with this, and again, I keep saying this, I'll get maybe a little more to this as the presentation goes on, but the kicker of all of this is we're not intending on going out with this data and decertifying piles necessarily right away or anything like that. We want to, as a way to flag, to get the producer's attention and then end up having a discussion with INDOT as to why we might be seeing variability in gradation results from a stockpile, from loadout results. So, and take corrective action. The idea is to help producers get back on track, not be punitive. So the SharePoint data site calculates the PWL, and we'll show that later as an example of what that looks like. And then we generate a monthly summary for the producers that have multiple sources. We'll generate a monthly summary. We started doing that as to make it easier, so those of you that have many sources, the corporate managers, QC managers, whatever you want to call them, don't have to log in. They can have a quick view of how their sources are doing. All right. So again, we had at the end of the year, we held meetings with the producer management groups along with the relevant district geologists to review loadout data for every source, update control limits. These meetings were generally up to a couple hours long. I think they were pretty valuable just as a way to get on the same page and see how things went, and update control limits as necessary. It was an opportunity to review. So the regional meetings, we did present on that at the last year's, all right, this year's, I guess, in the spring regional meetings, and what was going on. And then, as I said a few minutes ago, we undertook a series of meetings and partnering with industry to update, make changes to ITM 211, decide how to go forward into 2026. All right, so what are we doing going forward? We made a decision back in June of this year. We had some drafts and shared them and made some edits and came to a consensus back in June that we would transition and implement the new ITM 211 in January 1st, 2026, to give everyone a chance to transition. And today's webinar is part of that transition of learning what's new and what to expect for that's going into effect coming January 1st. So as I said here, it was effective back in June. We sent out a letter to management reps notifying of the plan back in July, and it's going to be effective in about 6 weeks. All right, so online right now, there's actually two versions of the ITM. There's the new one. I think it's 0.1. The old one maybe is 0.1. The new one is not. So anyway, both are shown there. When the new year hits, we'll remove the old one, and you'll just see the new one. But So you can still, it's already online. You can go see it if you haven't already at our INDOT materials and tests website. And then again, here's the management representative letter that went out explaining all of this back in July. All right, so this kind of ends the intro of what we're going to talk about today. Now I'm going to get into the actual detailed changes of what is going on in what's changed in ITM 211. So you should have received from Katie sent out, I think those that signed up, correct me if I'm wrong, if that didn't, it wasn't how it went out, but either way, there was a study guide that have as a separate handout that has questions. And the idea is hopefully to help follow along and answer these questions as we go through the training. So the first one is what's new in diary reporting? What is new about the loadout sampling frequency for all products? So I guess the hint here is something is changing, has changed with each of these. What's new about test compliance producer monitoring? What is new about loadout PWL in the last 30 tests for sizes 8s, 11s, and QA? Where do we report our loadout data? And what was clarified about control chart plotting? So we will follow back up with these questions at the end here and have answers to these. But if you follow along, hopefully you can answer them before we get to that point. All right, so there are two general categories. I mentioned earlier at the very beginning that not everything that we changed in ITM 211 was related to the loadout changes and improvements we're making. We also had a number of other things which we've put into this bucket called program management that were a series of things that the geologists, materials and tests, others have noticed or suggested for improvement. It was kind of a parallel effort that was going on over the past year or so. And so we merged them together, but we wanted to talk about all of it today because, again, it's not just the loadout changes. So from the program management perspective, a lot of the things that we're going to show today or that we've added were things that were considered routine or, oh, well, this is how it's always been done since CAP started 30 years ago and things like that maybe weren't documented elsewhere. Maybe they were in maybe they were in the audit packet, but not documented in ITM 211, or they're in the CAP manual, but not documented. So we felt the need to add a number of these things just for clarity as new people come in, and there's a lot of you. I think as people become new to the program, if it's only written down on the back page of an audit checklist or wherever, that doesn't help anybody. So a lot of the things we'll show are things like that, or for clarity. And we also added diary reporting requirements for the compliance rate. I'll show that later in the loadout PWL. All right, so here's a lot of the comments from the loadout perspective. And as I've said, it's a result of over 2.5 years of collaboration with INDOT and Industry to make meaningful improvements regarding loadout testing. So we're going to start having the responsibility to achieve and maintain PWL of 90 beginning on 1/1/26. PWL will be calculated for you in SharePoint. When we get to the loadout frequency page, I'll spend a bit of time on that. But what we have some changes to the way the frequency is handled. That happens for all products, not just the 8s, 11s, and QA that have the PWL attached to it. So that is a key point to understand from today's presentation, that the frequency change for all products, not just the 8s, 11s, and the QA equivalents. Please, and this is true of it, has been true, and this remains to be true, please communicate with the district geologists. They're your best point of contact when you have questions or concerns. If you have, if you need to do something with data because you made a process changed, we can make that happen, et cetera. So it doesn't throw off the calculation. Again, the best way to handle that is through just a discussion. And again, there's not much left in 2025, but please use the remainder to prepare yourself for success. All right, so not going to be able to read everything on this slide, but this is the summary of changes that we're going to go over. The management rep letter did summarize this. So I guess really what we want to show here is there's just a lot of things that we're going to have changed that we're going to talk about. So, all right. So the different sections we're going to cover here reference sections, et cetera. I'm not going to read all these, but we're going to go ahead and dive right in. So right up here in the references under section 2, one of the new statements we added was that all the required documents be readily available and easily accessible to all necessary personnel. Not necessarily any specific incidents. I don't think, just a few things have been noted. Is if we have required documents, the plant tech, for instance, needs to be able to have them reasonably available to them, not at an office 30 miles away or whatever the case may be. So, and then down here, we just added reference to, we already had an existing ITM. For those of you familiar with asphalt and the way we do our quality assurance for asphalt, we use percent within limits. So that is an existing ITM 588 we've now referred to here in this ITM. Just a few, probably we'll call editorial here, adding the word particles and then referring to qualified product list, which is effectively what the CAP producer list is on our website. It's a QPL. We added the definition of a qualified technician, a little confusing what was written before. And you if you've been at CAP school before or other venues, I've explained this, but there are a few different ways or a few different definitions of technician. The certified aggregate technician is one that's been to the CAP school and passed the exam, but to actually run tests, you also have to be qualified by our district IA staff that does that. So you can be certified, but you can't run tests, or you could be qualified to run tests, but you then couldn't do the things listed here that you have to be certified for. So that's just adding that clarity to the ITM. We added just, so some of these are honestly for clarity. So we had quality assurance materials, but a lot of times they're called QAs. If you have QA8s or whatever, for instance, we just added that, hey, that's what that means. And the same over here, the alternate materials didn't used to have this extra language that's intended for non-state. They're often called commercial. And so we added the word commercial, just as these are the standard spec materials, QA materials, and alternate or non-state or commercial. So that's just for clarity. Under laboratory, we've added that additional laboratories can be listed in the QCP. If there's backup labs needed, and a statement that this actually comes from some other documents we have for other materials such as asphalt, that is a statement of access. If you're producing certified materials at a given time, then the department is allowed access to the lab and to be able to witness production and control activities. All right. So a lot more of the sections, and this is where we're going to get into some of the diary and loadout changes. These are the ones we're going to focus on here that are highlighted in blue, these sections. Again, we're going to start more in detail about frequency and the loadout the changes to diary requirements and loadout data reporting requirements. All right, so one of the, I guess, significant changes I want to point out, these two right here, are compliance rate. So this is the diary requirements, daily diary requirements, and these didn't change here, but we've added that the current compliance rate updated weekly, so it doesn't need to be daily, but just weekly. At a number of, we had some times we'd go out and we realized that compliance wasn't being checked or calculated, updated on a very frequent basis, and if it wasn't getting noticed or noted. So we want to be sure that for the production compliance that this is being noted in the diary if it starts to dip below, and I've got some slides on that about what happens when it does. So I'll get to that. And then also now the loadout percent within limits for the applicable products. So whatever 8s and 11s or QA equivalents you have, updated weekly on the daily diary. We've added now flakiness here to 11.1, just as some clarity. And so now, I mentioned earlier some significant changes. This is one we'll spend some time on here, is the changes to the loadout frequency. So down there at 11.3.3, for all products that have greater than 100 tons a year, sampling and testing will be in accordance with the QCP and establish at a consistent frequency per year per product, at least as frequently as the following loadout frequency table. So here it is. And this is, again, all new. And one of the takeaways is we're no longer doing a time-based, it's all frequency-based. And so essentially, if you have less than 100 tons a year for a given product, then no samples required. If it's greater than 100 tons a year for that product, it's at 1 per 8,000 tons or less than or equal to 8,000 tons. It could be less than that if you wanted to in your QCP. So one of the key takeaways here too is at the beginning of the calendar year, this was new, and this was a good idea that we worked out with industry, and idea came from industry. I think will be that, one of the reasons we had the frequency previous to that was time-based and based on month, et cetera, was INDOT didn't want to get down the road in a year and have a long time. If you were kind of maybe only loading out, say, a small amount, there were some loopholes that could happen where you didn't take a loadout test until late in the year. That's not what we were. That's kind of what we want to avoid. So what we came up with was, well, we can do 1 per 8,000 tons if we start off by taking a sample in the first 1,000 tons. So the calendar year will begin with at least one loadout sample within that first 1,000 tons, and then the remaining samples will be at the QCP established frequency or at the tonnage interval. And so I'll kind of jump down here to, for example, so if the QCP for a product says the frequency at 8,000 tons, which again, it has to be 8,000, it could be less if you choose to. The first sample of the year is between 0 and 1,000. And then the next sample of the calendar year is between 8 plus or minus 1,000. So down here, we see that the idea is we want to get that sample within plus or minus 1,000 tons shipped when you reach that number, or plus or minus a business day. Again, this was put in for probably large sources that might blow through that quickly. And then the second sample of the year, or third sample of the year, sorry, at 16,000 plus or minus 1,000, and so on. So hopefully this gives you an idea of what we're looking for. But within the first 1,000, and then if you choose to do 8,000 tons, it would be between 7,000 to 9,000, and then et cetera, and on from there. So there's no daily, monthly, or annual limit on the number of tests. We report and plot all QCP schedule frequency test results, even when corrective action is taken, and then track tonnage throughout the year, and the tonnage will reset to 0 on January 1st. So that is all pretty new, and again, a significant change that I think is worthwhile for hopefully you listening to understand and focus on. And again, this is effective for all products, not just 8s and 11s. All right, so a change here, just a flakiness index reporting, not less than once per week for each size during the start of production or production. No tests required less than 100 tons. I think that was just for clarity. So this slide here, this is not new. This is just the definition of test compliance in 12.5, showing that 95% required to be statistically compliant. What we've added here on the next slide is a little more clarity as to what that means. So under 12.5.1, production. So what we're defining here, the review of the most 30 recent production tests, which is not new, but it was just defining it here to ensure the compliance rate is met. And then again, that's what gets reported in the diary weekly. We added here three things, three paths, I guess, that could happen if that's not the case. So, well, I guess two things and then what to do. The first one is if the compliance rate is less than 95%, so it's dropped below 95, but the standard deviation is less than 5%, the producer shall establish a new target mean. So what we're saying here is the process is precise. There's not the standard deviation is not wide. It appears the target mean is incorrect, leading to the compliance rate being less than 95%. So that's the first one. If the compliance rate is less than 95% and the standard deviation is 5% or greater, we are viewing that as not being in compliance with the program, and the stockpile will be designated as non-certified material. So that was produced outside of the required compliance rate. In either case, the producer is required to notify the district geologist and note it in the diary when either one of these situations occurs. All right, so on then to loadout changes under 12.5. So 12.5.2 loadout. Again, we are requiring that the producer monitor PWL for sizes 8 and 11, as well as QA equivalents on the department's provided spreadsheet, which we'll show here in a little while. Again, we're going to go with 30. We went with 30, the most recent points. Since the last documented significant process change on the critical sieves identified shall be included in the calculation. So again, I mentioned this briefly earlier, but if there's a process change, then the geologist can assist with removing those and starting over. But otherwise, it's the last 30. After the first 5 tests are reported, it's going to calculate beginning with 3, I believe, but it's not until after 5 tests are reported we feel like we have good enough statistics. That's what the statisticians say. You need at least 5 to have good statistics. So after 5 tests are reported, when the PWL drops below 90 for a given product, the producer shall notify the district geologist, and then a plan shall be developed to bring it back above 90. So that depends on the situation, depends on how that will go. And the key we wanted to focus on here is that it becomes a conversation with INDOT and the district geologist to have a plan to improve. Again, it's not meant to be punitive. It's meant to help improve. Why is the PWL 75? What's been going on? How do we think we can get it back above 90? So the reporting requirements, again, the producer shall upload the results for size 8s and 11s and QA equivalents as directed by the department. So we didn't put anything here about SharePoint, et cetera, seeing as that could change if we develop a different app. So we're saying as directed by the management representative letter. So that can change as time moves on if we develop a new system. We also added to the ITM, it was not there before, that the producer shall continuously monitor and maintain statistical compliance. Again, we witnessed a few examples where the compliance had fallen out and the producer may or may not have been keeping up on it or even been completely aware of what was going on. So now it's required, and also, again, required to be noted in the diary on a weekly basis. Control charts. So I guess we finally acknowledged that they could be maintained electronically, even though that I think some of this, again, has been happening for years, but some of this is acknowledging. So they can be either posted on the wall, still old school, or maintained electronically. And then if the loadout points are plotted separately, loadout chart shall be maintained for a minimum of 30 loadout data points. All right. So this is a change which may be a little different from how you've done it, but this is important clarification to how we are requiring to plot test results. So the producer shall report and plot all normal frequency production and frequency loadout test results, even when corrective action is taken based on the test results. Resamples, et cetera, shall have test results listed in the diary but are not normally plotted. So the key is if it's one of the normal production frequency or loadout tests, even when there's corrective action taken, we're requiring it to be plotted. I know in some cases, all cases, that wasn't happening. So that is, again, a change I want you to be aware of and note, because it may be different from how you've been doing it. All right, so for control charts at the very bottom there, any proposed deviations from these procedures shall be identified in the QCP. If you're handling your control charts differently than what's listed here, then it needs to be part of your QCP. All right, so here in section 14 and 15, so the QCP and then some procedures, CAP procedures, we'll cover some of those changes. We're asking for the location. We're asking for latitude and longitude now, as opposed to just physical address and mailing address. We added the word allowed here, or changed, I guess, the word allowed by addenda to the QCP. And this one hit down here, if you have products that are intended to meet multiple gradation requirements, 23, 24, whatever it might be, the gradation limits are the more stringent controls for each product. So if there's one that's wider, one that's narrower, and it's being called both, it has to meet the one that's the most stringent to be able to be called both. Some of these things I will say this is one of those things that we probably assumed was obvious, but if we don't say it, it may not always be handled that way. So this is the identification of material stockpiles of signs. And so we added the word including ledges, if applicable, on the signs. If you've got multiple products of 8s from different ledges, the signs need to identify which it is when out in the stockpile yard. Then additionally, a list of test equipment calibrated to verified, frequency of that verification, and a statement of accessibility. If the lab's not located at a plant, the location of the lab shall be designated. I think this is some reworking of some existing language, but this is now, as you can see here, these are now the updated requirements. This is just some change to the detail, or not detail, but the update on the verbiage used here on the approval for QCP. So initially on the QCPs that are already in the program, goes to I guess these are new ones as well. I'm sorry about that. The QCP goes to the district geologist initially for review, and then the district geologist forwards it to the statewide geologist for final review and approval. So yeah, those are on initial QCPs. So there is a little maybe different than how it used to be, but we have the both layers of review. I think it's been successful. Down here under aggregate sizes and the coordinated testing phase, we just added a reference to AASHTO 57. Under sampling and testing, we've added the procedure for splitting in accordance with R96. All right, and then some additional sections coming up here as far as more of the general program management changes. So the way tickets, where the currently we have the CAP producer's approval number, originating source name, source number, aggregate size, and ledges. With stone materials, we are now asking the class of aggregate from the listed on the QPL, so to be included. This is under department responsibilities. We are codifying that we'll maintain an updated published list of all currently certified technicians. When auditing, we added the loadout in here, and then a reference to these samples, editorial in that case. And then under training, this is explaining what happens for certified technicians and how the technicians expire, the certification expires annually, and recertification is accomplished by attending the regional meeting or watching a video. And then clarification that certified technicians could not perform acceptance testing and sampling duties unless they're also qualified. And then qualified technicians can only perform testing, but are not allowed to sign a diary or CAP documents. So clarification on what I mentioned earlier of the two different types of, I guess, classifications of technicians. So this is under when there's stop shipment. The district testing engineer has the authority to suspend shipment under 18.7, and we're saying that just clarifying that the producer has the right to dispute that to the state materials engineer if they disagree with the decision. All right, so we are back to the point of these questions that we started off with a little while ago. So what's new in diary reporting? What's new about loadout sampling frequency for all products? What's new about test compliance, producer monitoring? What's new about loadout PWL? Where did we report our loadout data? And what was clarified about control chart plotting? So hopefully you all got the right answers. So what is new in diary reporting? we now have to report weekly the production compliance rate as well as the loadout PWL for applicable products. All right, so everybody's got 1 point, right? All right, what is new about loadout sampling frequency for all products? We take the sample at the scheduled frequency, and that's plus or minus 1,000 tons or plus or minus 1 business day. There's no more time-based sampling. And so we want the sample to take place at, and that's at is defined as plus or minus 1,000 tons or 1 day at the scheduled frequency. All right, what is new about test compliance producer monitoring? The production, if you need a new spreadsheet tool to do that, we have a spreadsheet tool. So we're requiring that the compliance is monitored and put in the diary. And then the loadout PWL is now required to be monitored and put into the SharePoint data entry worksheet. What is new about loadout PWL on the last 30 tests? You're required to maintain greater than or equal to 90 PWL, and you're required to notify a district geologist and develop a plan if the PWL drops below 90. All right, where do we report our loadout data? I've said it a bunch of times. If you haven't got it, then I don't know, you weren't listening. So in SharePoint or as directed through the letter. So again, right now going forward in 2026, it's in SharePoint. We'll show that here a little bit later as directed if that changes in the future. And what was clarified about control chart plotting? Required to plot normal frequency production, normal frequency loadout, even when corrective action is taken. So again, that may be different than what you've done. And don't plot retest, information tests, or entire production cone diversions. If you've diverted something that was out, you can report that in a diary, but it does not need to be plotted in the production or loadout normal frequency control charts. All right, so going to move on here to talk about SharePoint a little bit and what it looks like. For those of you that don't have access, you can request access through your district geologist. You'll get once you've done that, you provide your email address. You should get an email from INDOT. There's a link in there, and then please let us know whether it works or not. So, and if you need any help, go from there. So this is what it will look like when you go to open it. Sign in. Some users will get an additional pop-up after clicking the link. You can enter your full email address to continue, and it will not ask for a password. We've set it up. We'll set it up in the background to where you can access your source's information. So the best way to do this is to use a web browser for data entry. I'll say something about that in a second. But this is what your data entry section will look like. This is an example. There are additional tabs for other products. So you see down here, there's different sizes and different tabs, and you work with your district geologist if you need to add or change a material. And this is where you put it. So it's pretty simple. It's your date. It's the critical sieve value for that for that test. We're also asking for the decant results and a question about if all other sieves are in specification or not. I mentioned here that it's best to use the web browser for data entry. It is possible to use the desktop Excel version, but you have to save and close the desktop Excel for it to actually show up for INDOT to see. If we have anything else about that, I'm going to have to throw it to Kurt later. But all right, so this is the required things on the actual product. So we're asking to confirm your source and material information. The required things are shown here in orange and listed on the left. That's the name of the source number, aggregate name and size, the target sampling frequency here, that's set for 8,000, the critical sieve, the target mean, and then the upper control, lower control limit, and the decant spec limit. There are other items that are here that are helpful, but they're not as critical. So you could have tons if you want, number of samples, the software you're using, some other things down here, the sampling method, et cetera. But we don't require it. If you want to update it, please feel free. Again, work with your district geologist if you need to make a change to the material or update your control limits to match your QC plan. All right, for the loadout, so you enter it. I guess I already talked about this, but this is what you're going to be entering. You're going to be entering the sample date, the critical SIP percent passing, T11 decant percent passing, are the other SIDs within spec, any comments, and then if there is an INDOT witness to that test. That was something we were working on a couple of years ago. The witnessing, it could still be going on, but maybe not as much as we did in the fall of 23. So again, take note, the requirements to sample at the QC plan frequency within 1,000 tons plus or minus or 1 business day. Please asking for timely data entry if at all possible. It doesn't take a long time to do this. Kurt has shared some statistics with others at various meetings that the average time of login is not very long, in the span of a minute or so. So we're asking that once you get used to this, it shouldn't take too long just to pop in there, type in the data, close the browser, move on. We're going to allow the data to stay there over the months and years. The PWL statistics will begin to calculate after 3 tests, but it's not, you can kind of ignore it or just kind of have it there as an item to look at, but the action is not required until after 5 tests. And then the PWL will calculate the last 30 tests. The other test data will just remain in there for future long-term reference. And again, if you need to archive the old data due to a significant process change in the last 30 tests, please work with the district geologist, as we talked about earlier. So here's where it's actually shown the calculations on. So calculation box is below the information section that's shown here. The last 30 test results, in this case, we've got showing a 92. So it's in blue there. The count down here is 30, and it calculates the average and standard deviation. And so this is what you look at. You'd say we're 92, we're good. If that drops to 85, and you take action as we've talked about in the past, communicate with your district geologist when PWL is below 90 as per ITM 211, section 12.5.2. The product info box is used in data analysis in separate spreadsheets. So that's helpful for us to pull the data out. All right, so upcoming training opportunities today. So if you weren't here, or some of your coworkers weren't here, or you fell asleep or whatever, you can watch it later whenever you want. There'll be, for those of you that are attending CAP school or those that have employees attending CAP school, we'll cover this here in a couple weeks. The winter workshop in February, downtown Indianapolis, and then at the regional meetings in March, which, by the way, have not been scheduled yet, so you haven't missed it. We're working on getting dates for those. And I just want to say, before we go to the questions, I want to say thank you to everyone at INDOT and everyone in industry. Big thank you to Kurt Summer. I didn't make any of these slides today. Kurt and team in connection with industry put together these slides, and so I want to say big thanks to IMAA and the focus group and everyone involved over the last 2.5 years, making this a success and getting set up today and getting this webinar set up. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to have to ask the panelist team here about what kind of questions we might have, and I'll probably have to throw them their way anyway. So with that, what kind of questions do we have? None open. So Kurt says there are no open questions. All right. Well, that's good.
We did have one, and it was, if you're not currently selling any materials after the first of the year, you're not required to perform any loadout samples until sales begin. And that's correct. However, we do want to clarify that any certified material is being shipped as, even if the material is being shipped as commercial, even though it's state product, it still has to be in loadout frequency. So.
Okay, thank you.
I do want to remind everyone that if you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A feature down at the bottom of your screen so that we can have written record of all these questions, be able to send them out later as well. All right, we just had one come in, Matt. It says, will the current QCP need updated to reflect updated changes?
Yeah, there will be some changes depending on what is in your QCP. I'm going to say it most likely depends, but I would say yes, based on some of the control chart reporting requirements, the diaries, et cetera, and the loadout, the things we've discussed, there should be at least some changes required to your QCP. I'll throw it to Missy or others if you want to add on to that.
To be honest with you, Matt, you got it correctly.
Okay.
Any type of changes to your frequency needs to be updated, or any type of other changes. So, like additional labs and stuff.
All right, now's your chance. We still have 9 minutes. I'm gonna ask Katie to help me out here and see how long we wait on any additional questions.
Yeah, we'll give it just another minute. Here we go. We've got
Another one.
If still charting and running compliance by hand, are you still required to report compliance weekly?
Yeah. So the question is, if you're still doing it by hand, or you're still required to report it weekly. Yeah, we're asking that you report it on your diary, and the reason is we want to make sure that people are aware and it's getting documented somewhere. And even if you're doing it by hand over here, is the technician looking at it, et cetera. So yeah, it's still, and it's just an entry on your diary. It shouldn't take any time at all. Additional.
All right, thanks, Matt.
All right, from Greenfield Testing here, regarding time-based sampling being gone, we should probably mention it remains weekly for deleterious crush count flakiness on all coarse aggregate products produced for over 100. So thank you. Its gradation is time-based sampling is gone, but for the other things, deleterious, crush count, flakiness, it is still a time-based. Kenneth has asked here, do we have to pull loadouts on 8,000 ton frequencies, or can we name a frequency of our own choice? You can name a frequency of your own choice if it is under 8,000 tons. It can't be bigger than 8,000, but if it's less than 8,000, if you want to do 4,000, or otherwise, go right ahead. Is the compliance rate calculated on the Stonemont software charts identified as PWL the same as INDOT compliance rate taught in CAP school? Probably need to phone a friend. It's not. I think the answer is not quite.
Okay, so no, there's two differences between there's compliance rate for production, and then there's going to be the PWL for loadout. At the new CAP school, we will be going over the theory of PWL and give a couple of the examples and stuff like that. Our team has been really good about that. So there's two different types of calculations going on. They're similar, but not quite. And as for the compliance rate being put into the diary, yes, they have to put it in the diary, even if it's on the chart. We request it in the diaries if you read 211.
If fines such as sand have no critical sieves, are we included in these changes? The loadout PWL is not. That's only for eighths and so coarse aggregate. But some of the other changes, as far as the frequency and the control charting and some things like that, yes. So again, I think the best thing that I could say is discuss with your district geologist as to what exactly will affect your source. But the loadout PWL is a coarse aggregate topic, but it's a number of the other things presented today would affect your fine aggregate materials too.
We still have about 5 minutes left. If anybody has any other questions, again, please put them in the Q&A feature on there. We'll wait another minute or two to give people an opportunity to type in their question as well. If you have any questions that we don't get to as part of this webinar, please feel free to reach out to your district geologist or Missy at the main office or materials and tests with any other questions so that we can get those updated and sent out with the follow-up meeting materials.
And we got a couple questions here in regards to the scale ticket information. What is the reason of including the class of aggregate of the ledger numbers already present on the ticket? The background reason is so the field, when they're receiving the ticket, can pretty quickly understand what the class it's approved for is, because if not, they have to go search through the CAP product list, and so that's the background for that. All right, 11.3 says that 8,000 tons is plus or minus 1,000 tons, not under 8,000. My understanding is right. So 8,000 is if you've chosen to do 8,000, then you need to get your loadout sample between 1,000 of hitting 8,000 of shipment. So if you've so it could be less. It could be you've reached ton 7,500 of loadout of shipped material of that product. You could pull the sample. You don't have to wait until exactly ton 8,000 needs to be in that window. And if your frequency is different in your QCP, it would be 4,000. So it would be then 3,000 to 5,000, et cetera. It's plus or minus 1,000 tons of hitting that shipped tonnage number. Where do we find the compliance rate? I
can answer that one for you guys.
Okay.
I have, we do have some worksheets for you guys that we can send to you of the compliance rate for the regular production. For PWL, that is in our shared folders. And if you need access to that, then we will give it to you. Just send it to Kurt, me, and Tim Hood. But as for the compliance rate, we do have worksheets that your district geologists have, and we can send it to you.
All right, we got a lot.
I can answer the latitude and longitude one as well. The latitude and longitude is just more or less of where your source was at in the world. We do know that sometimes the township and range is not always available to everybody. However, in your diaries, if you are a limestone source, you do need your coordinates that relate back to your source map in your diary. I haven't read this.
All right, Missy, do you want to take the ticket question too?
The which one?
For a system that will not allow us to print the ledger number on our scale ticket, can we handwrite it on the ticket?
You can handwrite it. Just make sure it's correct and that it does not get erased off your ticket. We've had these issues before.
All right, lightning round now. Why is the 8s and 11s loadout now 90, but the 8s and 11s production still at 95 and not also 90? The reasoning was when it's been in a stockpile, potentially handled, the goalposts are wider, so to speak. So 95 is still the standard that we all want for production, but we recognize that when it goes to loadout, additional variables have happened, and it would be maybe not as reasonable to achieve 95%. So that's why we did that, recognizing that the handling, et cetera, happens. So, and we've reached 1:30. So thanks for all the good questions. Any closing comments, Katie?
Thank you for everybody for attending today live with us. Again, we are recording this today. We will send out the information on the recording when it is available, as well as all of the follow-up documents like the slides, the study guide with the answers on the study guide, and any of the answers from our Q&A today and any other additional questions that may get sent to the district geologists or over to the district of or Division of Materials and Tests. So thank you again. Look out for that email from us coming up with the recording information and all of the downloaded material. So thank you all, and we hopefully will see you sometime in the spring, if not before.